Please let me in. I'm so cold.
Stay there under the rain. That's where you belong. And do my laundry now.
My name is Claudine Mercer, and I was never the type to make a fuss. Not in public, not at church, and certainly not in my own son's home. The same one my late husband and I helped him buy when he barely had 2 nickels to rub together. I was raised in Beaumont, Mississippi, where a woman's pride was measured not by how loud she spoke, but how much she could endure in silence. And for years, I wore that silence like a crown. But even queens get tired of pretending. The day I found myself standing barefoot in the backyard of my son's house, in the pouring rain, scrubbing my daughter-in-law's stained blouses on a plastic washboard, was the day I realized silence can drown you if you let it. And baby, I was soaking. It didn't start with the rain. No, it started months before that. When my son Julian married that woman, Zahara, she walked into our lives like a thunderstorm in a sundress. Pretty, sharp-tongued, always smelling like too much vanilla, and not enough sense. Julian met her at some pop-up art show in Atlanta. She was posing in front of one of those abstract paintings. You know, the kind where it looks like a toddler spilled Kool-Aid on canvas. He said she had a vision. I said she had tricks. But I kept my mouth shut. What did I know? I was just the mother who raised him on her knees after his daddy died from a busted lung at the mill. I only taught him how to boil rice, dress a wound, and spot a lie in a pretty dress. Zahara moved in the moment the honeymoon photos were still warm. She brought suitcases full of glittery nonsense and ideas of who I should be in her home. But what really slapped me wasn't the way she called me Claudine instead of Mama like Julian did. It was the way she smiled at me like I was the help. "Can you do just one load?" she asked sweetly one morning, after I'd just come back from my physical therapy. I blinked. "You mean the laundry?" She laughed like I had told a joke. "Of course, I mean, you're here all day while Julian's working, and my back's been acting up." Her back. Her 29-year-old back that seemed perfectly fine when she was bent over in front of the mirror, taking selfies in her waist trainer. Again, I held my tongue. I told myself, it's just clothes. Help her, be kind. She's your son's wife. But kindness shouldn't cost you your dignity. It started with one load, then another. Then it was her delicates, her workout tights, her silk scarves, the detergent I bought with my own money, my hands. Then came the day she unplugged the washer to save energy and handed me a plastic tub and washboard like I was her personal laundress in 1962. "You used to do it this way, right? Old school," she said with a giggle. That was Tuesday. By Thursday, the sky broke open like a secret, and it poured like heaven had run out of patience. I stood in the yard, scrubbing her white jeans with bleach burns already on my knuckles. I didn't have an umbrella. I didn't have gloves. I didn't even have dignity left. Zahara watched from the window, sipping what I assumed was oat milk latte in a gold-rimmed mug, and never once offered to help. Not even when I slipped in the mud and bruised my hip. When I got back inside, dripping like a stray cat, she said, "Oh no, you got them wetter." And then she laughed. That night, as I sat alone in the guest room that used to be Julian's nursery, something in me cracked. It wasn't loud, just a small, painful snap. I stared at the photo of my husband Roy hanging beside the bed. I whispered, "You see in this mess?" Roy was a quiet man, but if he were alive, he'd have had 2 words for Zahara. Hell no. I didn't have Roy, but I had something else. Memory. Patience. And the truth. You see, this house, the one Zahara walked through like she owned it, wasn't fully theirs. It still had my name on the deed. That was the condition when Roy and I gave Julian the down payment as a wedding gift. Zahara didn't know that, but she would. Oh, she definitely would. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Zahara's smug face staring at me through the rain, like I was the punchline to some sick joke she told herself to sleep better. Julian came home late, as usual. Zahara met him at the door, wearing nothing but a silk robe and a smile. Their laughter floated down the hallway like perfume. Sweet and rotten. I heard her whisper, "You know your mama forgot to rinse the clothes properly? I had to rewash everything." Lies. But I stayed quiet. Again. Not because I was weak, because I was waiting. The next morning, I got up before the sun. I made coffee in silence, the same way I used to when Julian was little, back when our kitchen smelled like grits and dreams, not eucalyptus candles and entitlement. I sat at the breakfast bar and opened the drawer where Zahara kept the bills. She was careless with paperwork. Thought if it didn't have glitter or drama, it wasn't worth attention. Big mistake. I found the mortgage folder. My name was still listed beside Julian's, just like I thought. But here's what Zahara didn't know. I'd been quietly paying a third of the mortgage every month from the life insurance money Roy left me. Not because I had to, but because that's what family does. And I was family. At least, I used to be. Later that day, I made a trip to the county records office. I needed a copy of the full deed, just to remind myself, and eventually Zahara, where I stood. The woman behind the counter smiled when she saw the file. "Ah, you're the Mercer co-owner. This house still got your signature all over it." I nodded. "It sure does." Back at the house, I watched Zahara throw a backyard brunch. She'd invited her girlfriends, all of them plastic smile types with baby pink lip gloss and judgments sharper than steak knives. They clinked mimosas and snapped selfies next to the patio heater I bought last winter when their power went out. Zahara was telling them about her minimalist luxury lifestyle, how she had live-in help, me, and how she ran the household because Julian was too busy making money to care. That was the moment I knew. This woman didn't just tolerate my presence, she twisted it into a performance, a trophy. I was her mother-in-law, and her silent maid. "You look tired, Claudine," she said later that afternoon, tossing a stained tablecloth at me. "Mind getting that washed before dinner? We're having Julian's boss over." I held the fabric gently, almost too gently. "I'll handle it," I said softly, and I smiled, because I had already called my lawyer that morning. I wasn't going to throw Zahara out with drama. No screaming, no showdowns. I wanted precision. I had documents drawn up to file for partition of property, which meant I could legally force the sale of the house unless Julian bought me out. And based on what I knew of their finances, which wasn't much beyond Zahara's Gucci habits and Julian's late car payments, they weren't ready for that kind of heat. But I was. 1 week passed, then 2. I didn't say a word. I still folded their towels, still made quiet tea, still listened when Zahara bragged about her resilience. But at night, I gathered every receipt, every transfer record, every piece of paper that proved I wasn't just a guest. I was the spine of that house. 3 weeks later, I requested a formal meeting with Julian and Zahara. I asked politely, in that sweet, tired voice that always made folks assume I didn't know any better. We met at the dining table. Zahara wore her neutral makeup look, which still somehow sparkled, and Julian looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. "I won't waste your time," I said calmly, sliding the manila folder across the table. "This house isn't solely yours. You know that, Julian. You signed the deed with me. But Zahara, you don't." She laughed. "Excuse me?" I opened the folder. Inside, copies of the deed, payment history, mortgage records. Zahara's laugh shrank to a nervous cough. "I own 45% of this house, and I've filed to have it either sold or my share bought out. You have 30 days. Silence. Zahara blinked. "Wait, you can't." "I can," I interrupted, folding my hands. "And I have." Julian looked at the papers. "Mama, why are you doing this?" I looked at him, really looked. "You sat back while your wife had me washing clothes outside in the rain. You didn't ask why my hands were bleeding. You didn't see me. This house was built on love, and I refused to let it rot with disrespect." Zahara stood. "You're gonna be homeless." "No," I said, rising slowly. "You are, unless you buy me out." I packed my bags that night, not in shame, but in peace. I had options, I had plans, I had value. And for once, they knew it too. But the story doesn't end there. Because karma, she's got a sweet tooth, and she was just getting hungry. 2 days after I left, the group chat with my old Bible study sisters was on fire. Apparently, Zahara had posted one of those dramatic black and white quotes on Instagram. "Sometimes the devil comes disguised as family. Protect your peace, queens." And she had the nerve to tag me in it. Imagine that. The same woman who used to hand me her panties to scrub in the rain now wanted to play the spiritual victim on social media. I didn't clap back. I didn't comment, because real karma doesn't show up online. She shows up in silence. And I had already opened the front door for her. I moved in with my cousin Lorene, a tough-as-nails retired nurse with a heart like honey, but a tongue sharp enough to cut tile. She lived 15 minutes from Julian's house in a lovely brownstone filled with plants and jazz music. No one asked me to scrub anything but the counters after dinner. "About time you stood up for yourself," Lorene said one night, pouring me chamomile tea. "That girl been treating you like the help for too long. Now watch, that house gon' teach her what real rain feels like." Lorene wasn't wrong. Within a week, my lawyer sent me an update. Julian and Zahara had asked for an extension. They needed time to explore financial options. Translation, they didn't have the money to buy me out, not even close. That same week, a realtor knocked on their door. I'd officially listed the house for sale. Zahara called me, voice shaking with faux sweetness. "Claudine, this is embarrassing. People in the neighborhood are talking. Don't you care how this makes Julian look? Did you care when you had me in the yard like I was on a plantation?" I asked calmly. Silence. I didn't hear from her again after that. But I heard about her. Zahara had started posting less about soft life and more about hard lessons. Her influencer sponsorships dried up when one of her Instagram lives was interrupted by a background argument. Her yelling at Julian about losing the house to your mama. Meanwhile, I was sipping lemonade on Lorene's back porch, watching hummingbirds flirt with the feeder. I wasn't gloating, I was healing. But healing doesn't mean forgetting. A few days before the 30-day deadline, Julian showed up at Lorene's, alone. He looked tired, pale, older. "Can we talk?" he asked. I nodded and invited him inside. "I messed up, Mama," he said, sitting on the edge of the couch like a boy again. "I should have said something sooner. Zahara, she's been pressuring me to cut you out for months." My jaw tightened. "I knew she was a handful," he continued, "but I didn't think she'd be that cruel. I thought, maybe you two just didn't click." "She targeted me, Julian," I said softly. "And you let her. That's what hurts." He dropped his head. "I understand why you're selling the house. I just wish it didn't have to be this way." "It didn't," I said, "but she made it this way." Then I stood, walked to my purse and handed him a small envelope. "What's this?" "Options," I said. "You want to buy me out? You'll need a partner." I spoke with the bank. They're willing to refinance, but not with Zahara's spending history attached. She's got too much debt. If you want to keep the house, it'll have to be you alone. He looked at me like I'd handed him a loaded gun. "I'm not trying to ruin your marriage," I added. "I'm giving you the choice your wife never gave me. Respect." 3 days passed. Then 4. On the 5th, I got the call. Julian had moved into a hotel. Zahara was refusing to leave the house. The realtor couldn't schedule new showings because she was canceling them, claiming she still had squatter's rights. The attorney sighed. "Miss Mercer, I'll have to file for an emergency order." I nodded. "Do it." That was the day I stopped hoping Zahara would leave with grace. Some folks only learn when the world crumbles right on top of them. And I had the blueprints. The hearing was set. Zahara finally realized I wasn't bluffing. She showed up to court in an all-black outfit, like she was the widow, dramatic hat and everything. She tried to cry in front of the judge, said I was emotionally abusive and neglected as a house guest. But the judge was a black woman in her 50s, with no time for nonsense. "Ma'am," she said, looking at Zahara with mild disdain, "if I were forced to hand-wash someone's clothes in the rain, I'd be a lot less patient than Ms. Mercer." Zahara's mouth dropped. The order was granted. They had 10 days to vacate or finalize a refinance with Julian alone. I went home and baked peach cobbler. I didn't even eat it. I just needed to smell joy again. But baby, the joy was just beginning. Because karma? She brought a +1. Day 9. Zahara still hadn't left. She was running out the clock and I knew it. According to the judge's ruling, they had 10 days to either buy me out or vacate. Julian had already packed and moved into a 1-bedroom extended stay near his office. He said he needed space to think. I didn't ask about their marriage. I didn't have to. You could already see the fractures forming in Zahara's carefully curated life. Her Instagram had gone dark. The inspirational quotes stopped. Her weekly skincare hauls vanished. And her friends? Crickets. I guess folks don't like being associated with failure when their brand is built on luxury. I got a call from the realtor on day 10. "She's still in the house, Miss Mercer," she said, sounding frustrated. "She blocked the driveway with patio furniture, refused access to the stager, claimed she's manifesting her win." I laughed out loud. "I'm sorry," I said. "It's just, she really thinks this is a war she can win with incense and hashtags." The realtor chuckled. We'll let the sheriff handle it tomorrow. And baby, the sheriff showed up early. A black woman in uniform, boots clicking across the concrete like justice herself. She gave Zahara 5 minutes to gather her things. Zahara, wearing a silk bonnet and a full-length fur coat in the middle of May, tried to record the whole thing on her phone. "Y'all gonna see how they treat black women," she yelled into the screen. The officer calmly said, "Ma'am, the black woman who owns this property is standing outside the gate, and she wants her house back." Zahara froze. She looked over and locked eyes with me. I didn't gloat. I didn't wave. I just stood there in a linen blouse and sandals, holding my dignity like a purse I never planned to put down again. She left with 2 suitcases, a dead succulent plant, and no roof over her head. She got in her leased white Audi and peeled out like she was late for a photo shoot. And me? I walked back inside. Into my house. It smelled like cheap candles and resentment. The floor was sticky with spilled oat milk. My guest room, the one she used to call the servant quarters, was in shambles, makeup stains on the mirror, hair bundles on the floor, trash bags stuffed into the closet. But I didn't cry. I turned on gospel music, opened every window, and began cleaning. With joy. Because for the first time in months I wasn't cleaning for approval. I was cleaning for peace. A week later, Julian called. He sounded small. "I filed for divorce," he said. I said nothing. "I should have protected you, Mama." "You didn't," I replied. "But now you can start protecting yourself." Silence. "I don't deserve forgiveness," he whispered. I took a deep breath. Maybe not. But that don't mean I won't give it, eventually. I didn't hear from Zahara again. Not directly. But a mutual friend told me she moved into her cousin's house in Tampa, tried to start a lifestyle YouTube channel called Zahara Rebirth, and was currently beefing online with another influencer over copyright. I blocked her name across every app. She no longer lived in my mind. Because you don't mourn the loss of someone who handed you pain in a wine glass and dared you to swallow it. You release them. I didn't sell the house. Not anymore. I kept it. Refinanced it in my name alone, and turned that guest room into a studio where I now teach quilting classes to neighborhood women. Real ones. Women who show up in sweatpants, with babies on their hips and stories in their eyes. We talk, we laugh, we cry. Sometimes we pray. And every now and then one of them will ask, "You ever been through something like this?" And I'll smile. Not because I want to relive it, but because I survived it. The roof Zahara bragged about? I'm still under it. But now it shelters truth. And hers blew away the moment she forgot that the people you step on climbing the ladder might just be the ones holding it steady. Spring arrived like a slow, hopeful song. You know, the kind that doesn't burst into the room with fanfare, but instead seeps into your bones quietly. One day, you notice the sunlight is warmer. The laughter in the house comes easier. And the rooms no longer echo with tension, only music, pots clanging in the kitchen, and conversations that don't feel forced. I never thought I'd say it, but my house became a home again. And the craziest part? It didn't happen because they changed. It happened because I did. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror one morning, brushing my silver curls, when it hit me. I no longer looked like the woman who had knelt in the mud washing Zahara's clothes in the rain. Not because I had grown stronger, because I had remembered who I was. I was Claudine Mercer. Born to a seamstress and a steelworker, raised on discipline, prayer, and red beans. I had raised a son by myself, buried a husband without losing my soul, helped build a home from scratch and watched someone try to turn it into a throne for their ego. And I survived. The quilting studio blossomed. Women came in from across the neighborhood, Black, Latina, even a few elderly white women who had lived in the area since before the city had gentrified it into polished lies and yoga cafes. They came to sew, but they stayed for the healing. We stitched stories into fabric, hurts into patterns, secrets into seams, and somehow each quilt became a diary of resilience. One rainy Wednesday, a woman named Trina came to class late. She looked shaken. "Sorry," she said breathlessly. "My son's new girlfriend just disrespected me in my own kitchen, called my collard greens slave food." The room went silent. Every woman looked up. I didn't speak right away, just handed her a cup of hot cinnamon tea and guided her to a seat. "Baby," I said softly, "let me tell you a story." And I told it. Not the petty version, not the Instagram version. The truth. About the rain, about the silence, about the moment I chose peace over pride, but never again over respect. They listened like church. Not a single phone buzzed. When I finished, Trina wiped her eyes. "You stayed quiet for so long," she whispered. "Weren't you scared she'd win?" I smiled. She did win, for a little while. But karma don't rush. She waits for the perfect moment. And then, baby, she comes wearing boots. I never saw Zahara in person again, but Julian visited a few times. Quiet visits. He'd sit on the porch with me, 2 coffees in hand, and apologize more with his silence than his words. He'd lost his marriage, his house, but in a strange way, he was freer. Without Zahara's voice in his ear, he started to hear his own again. One day, he asked, "Mama, if you could go back, would you have done anything different?" I didn't even think. "No," I said. "I'd still wash those clothes in the rain, because the lesson that followed was worth every drop." By the end of summer, I had converted the upstairs room into a guest suite. For travelers, for healing women, for grandbabies if I ever got any. The house pulsed with energy again. Not chaos, not ego, just life. People often think revenge has to be loud, explosive. But let me tell you something. The quietest revenge is living well. Sleeping in peace under the same roof someone once bragged you'd never belong under. Cooking your favorite meal in a kitchen they once called theirs. Walking barefoot across clean wood floors, knowing you mopped away their memory. Knowing you stood tall without ever raising your voice. Because the loudest thunder doesn't come from shouting, it comes from silence that knows its worth. And baby, I am thunder now. If this story reminded you that respect is earned but dignity should never be surrendered, then this message was meant for you. Remember, karma may walk slowly but it never loses anyone's address. If you enjoyed this unforgettable story, hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell because the next story might leave you even more speechless. And until we meet again, protect your peace, know your worth, and never underestimate the quiet strength of someone who's had enough.